vitriolic criticism of the DHS, because we certainly know it deserves it. Coming up now, we're going to throw to this interview with Flight 253 passenger and eyewitness Kurt Haskel. Of course, he was the eyewitness to the manufactured underwear bomber attack, and Rob Dew travelled to Michigan to get part two of this interview, which focuses on the aftermath of what he witnessed and the government cover-up relating to the underwear bomber incident. So let's go to that clip now.
An intelligence agency gave Abdul-Muttalib an intentionally defective bomb and put him on the plane to stage a fake terrorist attack.
Continuing now with our breaking news coverage, new facts on the table tonight about just how hard the father of the alleged Christmas bomber tried to warn U.S. intelligence about his son.
One thing I'd like to point out is that the system worked.
The mainstream media, anyway, is nothing but a fourth branch of the government. Whatever the government says, the media reports. They don't question it. They just accept whatever the government says is fact. And I really found that out during this case. I didn't know anything about that before this, but I would see it firsthand where different reporters would interview me and they would think I had something important to say, only to figure out that their higher-ups would, not let them report the story, and then I would talk to them and wouldn't appear in the press anywhere. This happened many times with me in the Free Press. I did 3-4 interviews with them, and they would never, ever report anything on me. It got to be just, I'd see the Free Press reporter at a court hearing, and I'd be like, hey, are you ever going to report anything on me? No, but I still have all my notes on the case, would be the response, and I'd be like, okay, we'll talk next time, I guess. Okay. That kind of thing. Up until they were forced to cover me right before the trial happened, then the media was kind of forced to talk about me because I was named as the only witness for the defense. So, you will see the media talking about me if you go back to October, but from, say, January 2010 until October 2011, you'll see basically nothing of me in the mainstream media except for 2 Fox News interviews that I did in January 2011, which I was very shocked that they aired. Fox News local here in Detroit actually did an interview with me outside the courthouse in January 2011. I had about 10 reporters, or maybe 10 to 20 reporters standing by me, and I said, look, this is what happened. I know none of you are going to report it, and I told them the story what had happened. I was shocked when Fox News actually did report it on their 5 o'clock news here in Detroit. And then not only that, they came to my office the next day to do a follow-up interview, and I actually aired that on the 5 o'clock news. So,
was the man known as the underwear bomber a pawn in a larger plan by our own government? We told you about the 2 local attorneys, both passengers on board that plane on Christmas Day of 2009. They believe the government was behind the scare in the air.
The U.S. government gave Muttalib an intentionally defective bomb.
It's a shocking allegation, but Kurt Haskel remembers seeing Abdul-Muttalib at their gate at the airport in Amsterdam. He didn't have a passport, but Haskel says a man with an American accent in a tan suit helped him board anyway.
What he said was, first of all, this man needs to get on the flight and he doesn't have a passport. He's from Sudan. We do this all the time. That's a word-for-word quote. That was basically the only mainstream media coverage I had from January 2010 through October 2011. Yeah, I went to a lot of the hearings in the case because I found out early on that the media wasn't reporting what was going on at the trial. I would go and see things, and then I'd read the newspaper the next day, and the things I read in the paper wouldn't necessarily be the things that I think they should be reporting on or were reporting on. It was really kind of strange. I went to a hearing, I think it was in July of 2011. That was a hearing to determine whether Anthony Chambers, who by then was appointed standby attorney, remember Abdul-Muttalib fired his initial court-appointed attorneys pretty early on.
Judge Edmonds then gave him a standby attorney, Anthony Chambers, who was just kind of a helper, is basically what a standby attorney is. So this hearing was to decide if Anthony Chambers would have access to all the evidence in the case. And I listened to the prosecutors argue, and what they said was, we don't think Anthony Chambers should have the evidence in this case, but only Abdul Muttalab. And the reason they gave was, if we give the evidence to Anthony Chambers, third parties can subpoena it and get the evidence to use it to sue us. Because Anthony Chambers doesn't have the attorney-client privilege, which would shield the giving of the evidence, by any subpoena he would receive, because he's not an attorney on the case, but only a standby attorney. And I thought that was pretty telling. It raised red flags with me. Number one, why does Abdul Muttalab not have a regular attorney? And number two, why is the government concerned about being sued in this case? What had they done to get sued? Maybe put Abdul Muttalab on the plane with an intentionally defective bomb? I don't know, but I thought it was pretty telling. And Judge Edmonds decided, well, I'm only going to give the evidence to the defendant, Abdul Muttalab, and then he'll have to decide what Chambers gets, if anything, from there. So the government won that hearing, and it was just kind of pretty telling, to me anyway, and that didn't get reported in the media as I thought it should either. No mention of the government being sued or anything like that. And another hearing I went to was, again, in I believe it was mid-2011 or so, and Anthony Chambers at this hearing requested that the trial be delayed. I think it was set for early October, so there was maybe 3 more months until the trial started. And what Anthony Chambers said was, and remember, this is maybe a year and a half after the incident, he said, look, I've just been dumped all this evidence that I consider the most important evidence in the entire case. And he went and listed it. I've just been given Abdul Muttalab's passport. I've just been given the airport security video, security and audio video. I've just been given the composition of the bomb by the government's so-called experts, and he listed a couple other things too, something about DNA, which I didn't know what exactly he was talking about with that, but I thought it was pretty telling because several of the things he listed tie exactly into what I've been saying all along, that Abdul Muttalab did not have a passport, that he was given a fake bomb, and that he was escorted on the plane without going through security, and that would all tie into that. And the reason I thought it was important was because the government withheld this evidence for almost a year and a half, giving Chambers the least amount of time to look at it, the least amount of time to hire experts to testify for the defense and have them look at it, which is a common tactic of lawyers that want to play games in a case. You hide evidence and you give it at the last possible minute, because if you hide it entirely and don't give it to the other side, well, then that can change the outcome of the case entirely due to hidden evidence, but not if you give it at the last minute. So I thought that was pretty telling. And again, no report on the media about this or why it's important. So just another, another incident I saw in court that didn't really get reported. Now later on, as the trial was getting closer, I started going to the jury selection hearings. How this works is you put a potential juror on the witness stand, and each lawyer and the judge gets to ask a certain amount of questions. Well, the questions that were being asked were the same couple repeated over and over again. And Chambers would say, will you be able to tell the difference whether Abdul Muttalab actually possessed a bomb, or whether he actually had an explosive device, and different offshoots of that question. So I knew what Anthony Chambers' defense in this case was, that Abdul Muttalab did not have a bomb that could have exploded. And Judge Edmonds, when she was asking her question, she kept asking this question over and over again. Do you realize that sometimes the media does not tell the truth? In questions like that. So, and it was pretty telling, knowing that Judge Edmonds knew, at least what I took from it, that she knew the difference in the truth as compared to what the media had been reporting, and that the media had actually been reporting a lie in the story. So I thought that was pretty telling. And there was a date set just a few days before the trial for final jury selection. As my trial was ending, I got a text from my brother indicating that I would be testifying in the underwear bomber case that he heard on the radio in Florida. And I was actually shocked, because even though I'd been talking to Anthony Chambers, who indicated if he was appointed full attorney on the case, he would call me. He was not full attorney on the case. He was still standby, and therefore Abdul Muttalib himself had full decision over the witnesses in the case. So I immediately headed over to the courthouse to see if I could find out what's going on, and I ran into Anthony Chambers outside the courthouse, different courthouse than the one I was at, but only about 3 or 4 blocks away. I ran into Anthony Chambers outside, and he said earlier that day that Judge Edmonds asked Abdul Muttalib who he'd be calling as a witness, and he said the only witness he would be calling would be Attorney Haskel, me. So again, I was quite shocked at that. I really wasn't expecting him to call me as a witness. The trial was then set for just a few days later. I think this happened on a Thursday, and the trial was set for the next Tuesday, I believe. And Lori and I were planning on attending every day of the trial, and we went down there on the first day of the trial. And the very first matter that was taken up was the prosecutor's request to kick both of us out of the courtroom for the entire trial, which I thought was pretty interesting. It was a motion to remove Kurt and Lori Haskel from the court, or something. It was titled something like that. And the prosecutors indicated that I shouldn't be able to see all the witnesses before I testify. I was set to testify at the end of the case after the prosecution put their case on, so I wouldn't be testifying for about a month, is what they estimated. And Lori wasn't actually listed as a witness at all. So they argued their case, and Anthony Chambers said, you know, he didn't care if we were kicked out or not, so he had no response. But interestingly enough, Judge Edmonds said, I'm not kicking Lori Haskel out. She's not listed as a witness. I only have one requirement, and that is that she cannot talk to her husband, Kurt, about anything that goes on in this trial until it's concluded, which, again, was going to last over a month. So would have made for some very interesting times in our household. But very early on the next day, the case was settled with Abdul Muttalib pleading guilty to charges that require a mandatory life sentence, which nobody ever pleads to a mandatory life sentence. Not only that, he made this long, pre-prepared speech that sounded like it came straight from the Pentagon, if you ask me. It used language and words that I don't even think he knows what they mean. It wasn't language that I'd been accustomed to hearing from Abdul Muttalib during the case, and I thought it was part, at least to me, I think there's some sort of plea deal going on that we don't know about that required Abdul Muttalib to give this speech, plead guilty to all the charges, and and it's in order for some sort of promise that we don't know about, and nobody knows what that is. But you just don't plead guilty to a mandatory life sentence. Further, I've known for quite some time that Abdul Muttalib was offered some very lenient plea deals. I was told this by Anthony Chambers, and he turned them all down. So then I have the question of, why would you turn down a lenient plea deal just to plead guilty to charges that require a mandatory life sentence? And I would really like an answer to that question, but I don't think we'll ever get it. Well, the sharp-dressed man is important for this reason. One, he was the one that I saw get Abdul Muttalib, or help Abdul Muttalib, board without even having a passport. Now, who else can do that? Not only that, he was a man of some authority because he went down to secure hallway and talked to management. And he said to the girl working at the counter, he's from Sudan, we do this all the time. Well, you know, who are the we that he's talking about? Is that CIA? I don't know. Who are they that gets people on the plane all the time without a passport? So you have, and then you have the admission from Dutch police that Abdul Muttalib didn't even go through passport control, and therefore he didn't go through security there at all. You have to really wonder, who is this guy? He's speaking perfect American English at a Dutch airport, getting someone on a plane, an international flight, without a passport, without any bags or winter clothes except for a small gym bag I think he had. Why and how did this happen, and who is he? He's the key to the whole story, if you ask me. That's why it's important. This wasn't just some normal passenger that boarded this plane and he didn't go through, you know, security. He was someone put on the plane who shouldn't have been on, who didn't go through security. And that's why the sharp-dressed man is important, whatever his role in that was. The mainstream media won't talk about the sharp-dressed man because it blows the whole official story out of the water that Abdul Muttalib just got through security by mistake. You know, and he boarded the flight like everyone else. He didn't. He didn't go through security, he didn't show a passport, and he gets on our flight with a bomb or, you know, an intentionally defective bomb. So how can the media justify that? And not only that, you have the comments by Patrick Kennedy that we wanted him in the U.S. to track him. You know, anyone with 3 brain cells can figure out what's going on here. So how can they cover and actually report it? A week or so after the flight, very early on, I got a call from another passenger, and he said, look, you know, I don't want you to sound stupid when all the evidence comes out and the truth is known to everyone, but you didn't see what you did. What you saw was an unaccompanied minor being escorted through security, and, you know, I saw him after we landed in Detroit. And I said, okay. And then I said, well, he wasn't a minor, he was, you know, a teenager at least. And this man said, no, he was a minor, I saw him after we landed in Detroit. And I said, well, did you see him before boarding? And he said, no, I didn't see him before boarding, but I know that's the same person. And I thought it was really suspicious that he would say this. So, you know, I ended the conversation, and I did some looking into the man's background. I found out that he worked for a contractor for the Department of Defense, you know, which raised red flags to me. And then I did some more looking into this unaccompanied minor thing, and I found out, well, you have to be under age 12 to be an unaccompanied minor, and the bomber does not look like he's under age 12. You know, maybe he could pass for 16 or so, but not under 12. And Delta admitted that there were no unaccompanied minors on her flight. So that leaves me with a passenger calling me to try and get me to change my story. For what reason, I don't know. It's highly suspicious of me that he works for the Department of Defense. And interestingly enough, I Googled him recently and I see that he switched employers again, and now he works for a company that's supported by the Department of Defense, various members of Congress, the Senate, and various other people in the government. So to me, it all points to what I've been saying, you know, for quite some time now, that's what happened here. They gave him a fake bomb, they needed to stage a terrorist attack, and that's what they did. The place I get the information from that it was a defective bomb was well, 2 things. First of all, you know, for months and months and months, I'm just living with this idea that maybe my government tried to kill me by giving a terrorist a bomb to blow up my plane. And I didn't want to believe that, and I really wrestled with this a lot, wondering if that was really true or not. And I didn't know what to make out of it. It was a big piece to the puzzle that I didn't have. And in late December 2010, Anthony Chambers was quoted in the Detroit Free Press as saying the government's own experts that they've hired to be expert witnesses in the trial have reported that the bomb was impossibly defective because it lacked a blasting cap. So to me, that was quite telling that the own experts hired by the U.S. government don't even support their own theory on the case, that they have said that the bomb was impossibly defective. Now, if you add that piece of the puzzle together with all the other terrorist attacks that have been happening the past couple years, where the FBI has admitted to giving out fake bombs, such as Mohammed Muhammad, the Portland Christmas tree bomber, and the Wrigley Field bomber, and at least 5 or 6 other ones that I'm aware of. I can't remember all their names, but they're all documented and all admitted by the FBI. You see a modus operandi, or an MO, of the government here, where they admit to giving out fake bombs to stage terrorist attacks. And to me, it all points to what I've been saying for quite some time now, that's what happened here. They gave him a fake bomb, they needed to stage a terrorist attack, and that's what they did.
Astounding revelations there from Kurt Haskel, Delta 253 eyewitness on false flag terrorism, which of course is especially important now with the build-up to war with Iran. Astounding revelations there. Today's quote of the day comes from Will Rogers. A fool and his money are soon elected. That certainly pertains to what we were talking about with Mitt Romney before. A fool and his money are soon elected. Will Rogers. That's going to do it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. I've been your host, Paul Joseph Watson.